These are the chronicles of cold visitors from space and the evil of man.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. So Montauk Chronicles is complete, and it's been showing in various forms since December 23rd, 2014, a very short time ago. We recently had our world premiere at the Philip K. Dick Film Festival in New York City, and what I'm about to show you is the panel that followed the screening. But before I show you the panel, I'd like to thank everybody from the bottom of my heart, the people who supported us and followed this project over the years and truly encouraged us as we ran into many obstacles along the way. So thank you so much for everything, for all of your compliments and all of your emails. It means so much to us, and it's such an inspiration for us to continue and make more movies. So what you're about to see, once again, is the panel that followed our world premiere. Most of everybody that appears in the movie is on this panel. This is the best to date, the best public discussion and debate regarding the Camp Hero experiments. There are very real elements to this story. We started with our own investigation. It was very important that we started with a clean slate and our own investigation, so that's what we did here. And what I found along the way, after 10 years almost of being immersed in this subject matter and feeling many different things over the years about it, is that I feel it's extremely possible that at the very least the Montauk Boy program occurred beneath Camp Hero. Based on my research and things that I have to compare to, the idea of people being used against their will under false pretenses, if you do your research, you'll find that this is a very highly documented situation, not only in the United States but in governments throughout the world and throughout a good deal of history. So for anyone to deny this possibility is just naive and ignorant of the facts. If you consider that this was a mind control experiment, everything else is secondary. Obviously we covered all the ground in the movie, but my main focus was on the possibility that there were a number of young men that were kidnapped and used against their will in an experiment that was said to have been conducted for purposes of scientific research. It's very difficult to keep your focus on the wonders of time travel when there's a possibility that thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, as the subjects of my film claim, if not hundreds of thousands of children were murdered for this purpose. So everything else is thrown out the window if this is true. So what you'll see in the movie and on this panel that's following my message here is that focus. Did this happen? Were boys, runaway children, or boys in general being kidnapped and used for these covert experiments? And so I encourage you to do your research after you see the movie after you look at this panel, do your own research. Research things like MK Ultra, or the Tuskegee experiments, or the Dozer School in Florida. I've had my eyes on that situation. I mean, there were hundreds of bodies of young boys found where they literally have evidence. You know, we live in a world where there's great beauty, but we also live in a world where there are horrible things happening, and we're aware of that. And so I think there are also many things happening in the shadows that most people aren't aware of and probably would never want to believe. And that until we find answers, I won't abandon the investigation. In one form or another, I'll continue to look into this. But I think it's most important that, regardless of however our information is entertaining, we need to stay serious about the possibilities and never forget that crimes were committed to make any of the science or the alleged science possible. Everybody here, I'm assuming, just saw the film, correct? Yes. Okay. So we know relatively who everybody is. I guess I'll begin with asking anybody here, including Mr. Preston or Lee, if you'd like to ask a question here, and then we'll go to the audience and have you ask us questions. But does anyone here have a question for each other? I think we should start that way, maybe like a debate, and then we'll ask the audience for questions. What do you say? So
I have a question for Preston. Preston, you've seen now 2 versions of this film, and you have lived through the real issues.
The real nonsense.
What you just saw, how close is it to what really happened in your life?
Very close. That's what's giving me the willies.
Now, when you say the willies, what does that mean?
It's unsettled me. I'm shaking half the time, cold, freezing. Generally, I don't freeze. I come from just south of Albany, where the average temperature is 20 degrees in the winter as a high. But, yeah, I'm very unsettled. Let's put it that way. And you know, I've been getting away from the Montauk Project, going into other metaphysical, technical aspects, healing, doing healing stuff, doing music stuff. But this now has brought me right back to it. And when, I think it was, who was playing me? When he was crawling around, all I can tell you is I just wanted to get out of there. I just wanted to get out of there, that's all.
Where's Robbie?
Have a seat, sir.
I just wanted the cast here too. So. Robbie played the Montauk boy, the main Montauk boy.
Yeah, he was good, yeah.
Robbie, I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
He's not really sorry.
So Preston, this movie helped. You're saying that it triggered memories of things that actually happened?
Oh yeah, I recalled the whole cutting the transmitter apart.
What is the most convincing thing that you could tell someone who doesn't believe this story happened and doesn't believe in what you have to say? I mean, is there something you can give them to outside of your stories? Is there anything that you could tell them to go look at or research?
Just go out there and walk around. You'll feel it. Everyone tells me when they go out there and they look around, even to this day, it has a very heavy, oppressive feeling to the place. And generally, with places that have water running on them, water around them, you don't get that kind of feeling generally. You get a very pleasant feeling because we all come from water.
James, do you have any questions for Preston? Because I know you had interactions with Al, but How do you feel about James's story?
Oh, it's quite the norm for the Montauk project. It is. It's quite normal.
I know this kind of.
Well, I remember him.
Oh,
I remember him, but what happened was, you know, obviously it doesn't look the same now.
no.
And, you know,
Oh,
yeah.
I want to do selection for casting.
I remember when I went in there and I had said, well, who's in here? Because I wanted to know everybody that was in there, you know, and they said, oh, nobody, it's just us. And then I seen him behind the computers and I was like, well, who's that over there? You know, because,
This is when they took you down into the base?
yeah, and I was like, you lied, there's someone over there. And he was like, oh, I'm harmless, don't worry about me, I'm just a computer guy. No, look at me, do I look like I'm gonna do anything to anybody? And he calmed me down because I was ready to, like, because I felt like they lied because they said nobody was in there. And then I saw someone over there, and I'm like, what are you talking about?
That was my job.
Yeah, I was like, what are you full of shit, you know, there's someone right over there. Now I was like wondering if there's somebody over here, you know what I mean? So, and then I turned around, and then he calmed me down pretty much.
Preston, do you recall this at all? Or? I mean, I'm sure.
It could be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know,
I'm not trying to hire you.
you don't remember everything.
So I really can't comment.
Well, you don't remember everything, you know what I mean? It's kind of hard to remember every single little
No,
detail.
of course.
But
And it was also what?
It
How
could
many
have
years
been
ago?
a situation, because it was a situation I was in quite often. But I was the guy who put the boys back together again.
Lee, do you have any questions?
I would like to know how the two of you sleep these days.
I sleep fine. Number one, I did nothing wrong. The way I view it is there was a small group of us stationed out there by the forces from above to make sure the Montauk project did not go totally evil, or else we'd be in an entirely different reality right now. I felt I was one of the ones that brought God, Christ, whatever you want to call the entity, into the project. And there's a message here. The project ran for 3.6, went back and forth 3.6 million years, which means the concepts that the reality is based on was from, 3.6 million years. All it took to nullify the negativity, balance out the negativity, was about 7 days. The power that Stewart and Duncan tapped into when Stewart went back to the time of Christ and supposedly took the blood. That came through the Montauk project directly through Duncan Cameron and balanced out the darkness. So that gives us an idea of how much more powerful the powers of light, to use one of the better words, over the powers of darkness.
What kind of dreams do you guys have these days?
Well, not to cut you off, like you're saying that, it's not all bad. If you have 10 cops, not all of them are going to be good people. You understand what I'm saying? Even though they got the badge and all that. You're never going to be able to take the evil out of man.
You're abandoning the fact that there are decent human beings, though.
No, there is.
Mother Teresa, Gandhi, or do we think these people are imaginary?
No, definitely not. Well, if you would ask me, I would tell you that Jesus was a time traveler.
I would tell you he didn't exist.
Because all of our laws, and I'm not going to argue with you, but all of our laws and everything are based upon the 10 Commandments. You know what I mean? So, thou shalt not kill, all those laws are based upon that, really.
Preston, how do you feel about what James is saying right now?
Well, I look at it as, for me personally, it was a major learning experience. I would not have gotten the technical genius unless I had done something like the Montauk project.
But the importance of what you say is the importance of the Montauk project, the benefit of mankind. And I'm not saying that a lot of it wasn't for the good, but does the whole thing justify the deaths of so many people because how do you justify that? I've heard statistics that say, well, how many millions of people disappear
I've heard that too.
every year, and so 300,000 in the Montauk Project, well, that's like insignificant. But it's not insignificant. And I think in the film you say, Chris, that a lot of the people, a lot of the kids, young people that were abducted were runaways. They were stray people. They actually wouldn't be missed.
Not at all.
Right. So, and some of them that were involved with some kind of transporting technology experiments, and if they couldn't get to the destination, well, then they died, and then someone else would be brought in to take their place.
Yes, I know exactly what you're saying.
It's as if, as I was watching this, I got the sense that they were like lab rats, because
Yeah,
when one rat dies in an experiment, you bring
Yeah,
another
I
one
know.
in.
Yep.
And so it's hard to convince me that this was for the good of mankind, and it's probably
Yeah,
the
no.
real. And I think it's the real reason why, if all of this stuff really happened, it's the real reason for all the secrecy, because you don't tell the public that you're experimenting on members of the public, in hopes of bettering mankind. The public doesn't want to hear that.
No. Well, the way I look at it is, I agree with you. It is hard, no question. It's one of the most horrible things I believe was ever done. But I was involved in it. I couldn't get out of it, and I had no control over it. I was not one of the controllers. I did my best to bring, betterment into it. That's why to this day, if I find a Monarch guy, I'll work with him to bring him out of his, his messed up mind.
Q, how do you feel about all of this, what Preston and James are saying?
Well, I think that if you look at the human condition, we have 5 senses. But if you start looking at what those 5 senses can perceive and understand, they have charts that show you, well, the spectrum of light is this wide, and what we can actually see of that is this wide. Well, what about all the stuff that is on the other sides of the spectrum we can't see? And that's only really talking about our sense of sight. We have 4 other senses. Each and every one of them can only perceive a tiny slice of reality. So, to a certain degree, our scientific technology allows us to be able to perceive more. We have instrumentation now. I mean, we're all sitting here, we can't see the bugs, the microbes and the germs that are on the floor right in front of us. And, if they were big enough, we could, but again, the limitation of our senses. So what happens is that a lot of these things may sound very strange to people. They may say, well, aliens and they're time travelers and they're coming through different dimensions, and it really does sound like crazy talk. But through my work, all my life, I've been able to perceive more than just the 5 senses. And I can tell you that it's all real. One day science will be able to confirm our science, human science. We'll be able to confirm the existence of time travel, of other dimensions. I mean, even Stephen Hawking says that there has to be a minimum of 11 different dimensions. So my take on it is that all of us have perceived these kind of alternate realities in different ways. They through the Camp Hero, and other of us through different in different ways and through different venues. But I believe that there's a lot out there, Chris, that just it's there, it's real, but we all kind of live in our sensory little tiny bubbles.
Sure.
And we don't perceive anything.
I agree. And this is a good segue over into the audience now. So if I want to continue this debate, but let's start integrating the audience. So does anyone here have any questions for anyone on this panel right now? Yes. We'll start here in the front. We'll move our way back.
Well, are they still using trauma-based programming? Because the essence of the project didn't seem to be beneficial to mankind at all. It was a great big mind control project.
Oh, yeah.
And so you were saying something about all these different cities having these mind control centers. Are they doing it just with frequency, or are they taking people and just torturing them to death?
Well, I've been out of it, so I really don't know. I can't understand them abandoning this, the mind control aspect. They never found their universal signature to control everyone with. But I can't see them abandoning the look for it.
But didn't Al Bulick say that you could take somebody from their room, control them, and bring them back within a second? I mean, if you can do that kind of thing, then why are they putting thumb screws to people? I don't get it.
Well, from what I've heard, they're using pure technological systems to disassociate the programmee's mind. I've heard that they've gotten away from the brutality because they found better ways to do it technologically. But I can't speak from personal experience or experience attempting to deprogram some of these people. So I don't really know.
Lee?
Just to add to it, one possible answer to your question is not for the benefit of mankind that these experiments may still be going on, but we know now because of all the evidence, all the paper trail evidence, that going back to the late 50s and early 60s, there were in fact serious experiments going on behind the Iron Curtain into psychic phenomena. And the Soviet Union officials, they were looking for people who could be superb remote viewers. And then as soon as word got out through secret channels that that's what they were doing, well, the United States stepped in and said, well, we can't let them do that better than we can. And so the United States started its own program, and the CIA had lots of people, and they were testing people, and I know people who were tested and who were very good at this. The idea being, we're not doing this for the betterment of mankind, we're doing this so that nobody will do this better than we can in the field of warfare.
But it seems like the Cold War was really just a front, and behind that were, just a...
There were a lot of things that were going on. And both sides knew it. It's like if you had a handful of psychics who actually were given targets to look for, and they could find, if Americans had psychics who were looking for Soviet submarines located in different places around the world, well, that would give us a real hand up on where our enemy is located. But we already know that the Soviets were doing it and were already ahead of us in this. So the fact that they were doing...
My point was the whole Cold War thing was actually up front, and that there were these whole banks of scientists who knew that.
It's always a thing that the governments of the world, the military especially when it comes to UFOs, people have always said, well, why don't we all just share all the UFO information? Because these things appear all over the world, all over the skies. They can show up wherever they want, and they do show up wherever they want. They have their own agenda. No military force on Earth can stop them, can catch them, can control them. And so under the guise of, well, we don't really know what's going on, we should just let the public know that there are some unidentified things, but most of the stuff that you're reporting are the planet Venus, swamp gas, unexplained aerial phenomena, weather phenomena, and the lying and the cover-up has been mostly not just as a conspiracy, but I know from talking to officials who have opened up to me from the UK and from here in the United States, basically the idea for any cover-up in this kind of stuff is, we know something's going on, we don't know how to control it, we don't have the goods to confront it if it got nasty, so we're not telling you about it because we don't think that you, the public, can handle the truth of it. That's basically part of the solution for all of this. It's not, let's try and do time travel. I mean, what good could time travel be? I know that for the last 35 years, there have been scientists, I know this for a fact, that scientists have been trying to put a time machine together. And I mentioned this in the film, that an old friend of mine, Gordon Cooper, one of our original 7 astronauts, I was doing an interview with him about UFOs, and I didn't even bring this up. He said, would it surprise you that there are scientists who are friends of mine who are working on a time machine. I went, excuse me?
Lee, do you think it's possible that Cooper was making some kind of vague reference to something like this?
It's entirely possible. I mean, Cooper was involved, before he became an astronaut, he was a flight test manager out at Edwards Air Force Base. And he had a film crew that was out in the dry lake bed where they used to land the shuttles after the missions. And this film crew was out there, and he got a call in his office, and one of the guys with the camera said, listen, something just came out of the sky, it's shaped like a saucer, it had just landed on the dry lake bed on 3 tripod legs, what do you want us to do about it? And Cooper said, you got cameras, film it! Cooper called his superiors, said, well, what do I do now with the film? Because he had the film in hand, he saw the images on the film, and they said, pack it up, send it to Washington, and he did, and he told me it was sent to Washington where it was never seen again. You know, and I believe
So
that.
some spacecraft needed a tripod? It seems
Well,
a little like...
Apparently the visitors, and I do believe that there are visitors coming from various places, some of them may just have little tripods, some of them have little tubular things, others just can hover above the ground apparently, and you know, it's like we have as many different kinds of cars. We have 4 wheels, of course, because we don't know any better. You know, it's like Stanton Friedman, a nuclear physicist, always says in his lectures, he says, when somebody says to me, that bit of UFO behavior is impossible, what they're really saying is, I don't know how to do that. And if I don't know how to do it, it must be impossible. And that's part of the problem.
So we have another question here.
I just want to say thank you, Chris. A phenomenal film.
Thank you.
Preston, thank you. I mean, we go way back, and certainly you, Al, Duncan, you were all victims. I mean, I think we have to just establish that. The horror of the children is unspeakable. But going forward, I think the most important thing is the healing, which you have mentioned here, and especially with music. But the time element as well. I know a gentleman personally by the name of Dr. Dave Anderson, who actually has created this whole phenomenon of being able to travel in time. It is true. It is absolutely true. And I will ask you this. Time reactors, which he has produced, can be weaponized.
What?
Time as a weapon. Where are we with this? Where are we with the timelines? Do you know, Preston, where we're at as far as...
We get reality shifts about every 4 or 5 days now. About every 4 or 5 days we get reality shifts. I would like to say at this point, when I was first introduced to the work at Brookhaven National Laboratory, they told me that the group they were going to put me in was researching how to use the mind of man to control airplanes, ships, directly. That interested me, that fascinated me. So I said, yeah, I'm for that. By the time I found out what they were really doing, the only way you leave one of these projects on your own is with a book. I was trapped.
Do you think any of this information, anybody on this panel, my question go out to, or anyone in the audience, how would this information be palatable for the mass population, where everyone would unanimously agree and say, okay, this is it? And I'm sure this is a question that Lee asks a lot and is asked. How do we break this up from these kind of fringe element screenings, okay? And we're trying to make it not fringe element, but how does this become public debate? I think one of the things, the examples I made in the picture was showing the public hearing in 1995 and having Bill Clinton kind of half-assed apology about the experiments and only acknowledging some radiation thing like that was any better than what actually occurred. How do we get this out? Do we keep writing books? Do we keep making movies? Do we approach the government? And one of the questions I didn't ask you, Preston, or Stuart, or Al, was how come, what, in your words, what prevented you from going to the government and asking them to reveal this to the public? Do you feel like it even should be?
I don't know if the public could handle it at this point.
People lose their faith.
Okay, well the public is here. I mean, if you guys, okay, if tonight, and it seems like this is the only thing that would be publicly acceptable, if the president came, of the United States came on television and said, okay, we've been in communication with extraterrestrials for years. Would that be enough for you to believe it 100%? And how come there are individuals who are really credible, over the years, that why do you think that nobody believes this 100%? Why can't we just agree on it that this is happening? Sure.
It would not take the president for me. I think what it takes for everybody is for every single person to find an element of truth in what is being said and be willing to focus and open themselves up to that truth. Because until it affects somebody personally or someone they know personally, it's nothing.
Sure.
So you have to be able to have an identifying truth that resounds and resonates within yourself.
Right, but okay, I guess my other question is, do you feel like it's necessary that we all collectively know and agree that some of these things are real, if not all of them?
The atrocities, yeah.
Sure.
Well, I don't know, you remember what happened with Orson Welles when he said that, that was their first experiment to try to break it into the public, and people jumped off of buildings, and then, if that was the case, you had all these people trying to be good and do the right thing through religion, and the first thing that's going to go right out the door is all their religion. And you're going to have people that are trying to be good because of it, and now that they lost their faith completely because science is in control, they're going to just throw that right out the window, and they're going to go to do what they would normally do before they had faith.
How do you feel about, a couple years ago, the Pope came out and said that if there is alien contact, that doesn't affect Christianity, and that, they'll welcome them and basically try to convert them?
Well, seriously, I feel, because I'm open-minded enough to where, me personally, I couldn't care what color you were or what you looked like, but there are not a lot of other people out there like that.
Well,
I think that,
we've moved on from, the 1930s when War of the World took place, you know what I mean?
Eric, I know your point of view very well. We've had a lot of discussions. But what's significant about all of this, and what's insignificant? Like, what's important to know about this? Because I know you don't fully dismiss the idea that there might be intelligent life on other planets, and you believe in these things. But what's important to know about a situation like this where so many people are divided? A lot of people believe Preston and believe James 100%. A lot of them just feel like it's total hogwash. What's important, as someone who's very careful about what he believes, what would you say that's important about all of this, if anything?
I don't know, for me, it's kind of like, you have to go to the things that you can prove that there is evidence for, I'm assuming you're all here, basically, I'm kind of preaching to the choir, so you all probably know that, prime example, there's a World Trade Center Building 7 that did collapse, that did not get hit by an airplane, that no one ever talks about, no one ever asks questions about. I don't know what the answers are, I just know that there's questions. And so that's something that you can point to prove to people that the wool is being pulled over your eyes. You're not being told the whole truth. There was an MK Ultra. There was a Tuskegee experiments. There was a Joseph Mengele who did horrible things to people. And let's point to those things. Whereas unfortunately, when you start bringing these topics up, you instantly start getting associated with the people whose opening part of the conversation is about reptilians. And that's kind of a hard pill for anybody to swallow,
Why? We have this reptilian midbrain. What's the big deal?
What I'm saying is, everyone thinks you watch that show V from the 80s too much. And, you took too much acid, and hey, good for you. But, it's like you got to kind of, if what you're trying to really do is impart information, you got to deal it out in small doses and give it to people in bite-sized chunks of verifiable facts,
Well, sure.
What I don't understand is, I think, I can understand with the Orson Welles radio broadcast in the 30s and people panicking. It's not the 30s, okay? Even what we had with UFOs and flying saucers in the 50s. We've changed from that time. Are we not, in so many ways, ready for something like this to come forward?
No.
I really don't think we are in any way.
They try to break in little by little with all these shows on TV and all these movies.
No, it's not going to happen. Every day, I get emails and comments from my readers saying, isn't disclosure coming soon? No, it's not coming soon. And I really would like people to realize that. This whole disclosure thing, it's all bunk. And the reason for that is because we, the United Nations, I mean, I know this because I did a presentation at the United Nations in 1978. The only one ever done there in history, where I tried to get the UN to create a special international committee to study and share UFO reports from every major country. And I brought forth an amazing panel of scientists and military people who came there to be with me there to make the point. And yet, in the end, when the resolution was put forward, the United States and the Soviet Union vetoed it. And then I found out 30 years later, when the United Kingdom started releasing UFO documents, I found a bunch of documents that said, that actually indicated that they admitted that in 1977-78, they tried to stop my presentation from happening at the UN. And I didn't know this for 30 years. The problem is, Nick Pope used to work in the UFO office for the British Ministry of Defense for several years. And Nick told me a couple of years ago that they used to have a policy in the UK called spin and dirty tricks. And I said, so what does that mean? He said, well, what it means is we were told, those of us who were looking at all the UFO reports that were coming in every day, and that we had to evaluate them, we were told to do whatever we could to make those reports go away. And I said, well, what does that mean? He said, we were told to debunk them and to ridicule the people who made the reports. And I said, how can you say that to me? How can you say that that's what you were told to do? He said, because as far as Parliament was concerned, we couldn't figure out how to tell the population that there were things operating in our skies that we had no control over. We didn't know what they were, where they were coming from, what their agenda is. We couldn't catch them, we couldn't shoot them down, and so we were told to just ridicule all the reports and hope that it would all go away. But it never went away. The United States government in the 50s had a CIA panel called the Robertson Panel. And at that panel, they decided the same thing. We have to debunk UFO reports. Everybody's saying, well, aren't we ready? Why won't they admit anything to us? First of all, there have been UFO crashes in many countries, not just Roswell. And when that happens, and something comes flying out of the sky and crashes, although I often wonder, well, what's wrong with their technology? They keep crashing on our planet. Stay away from those lightning storms. And yet, what military organization from any country in the world that will swoop in, they'll pull the wreckage out, and they want to study it, maybe study any bodies? Is there any military organization on the planet that'll be willing to share it with others? No. And we all know that. There's only one thing that's going to make all this bullshit go away, and that is the visitors themselves. I put all the responsibility on their lovely little shoulders. They have to decide, whatever their agenda is, they have to decide when it's time to show themselves, like in V and other movies, Independence Day. It's time to show ourselves. Then there'll be no more question that we're here.